Hey, Jill, you wanted to chat. Come on in.
Hey, Joe. Thank you. I thought I'd catch you first thing before your day got too busy, but I'm going to get right to it because there's really no easy way to tell you this.
Doesn't sound good. What's going on?
Well, I've really thought about it. Opportunity knocked. Wasn't really looking, but I've accepted another position and I'm here to tell you that I'm resigning.
Resign?
Yes.
As in you're leaving, departing, exit stage left? Like, what?
Sounds like you're at a loss for words, Joe, and I understand this probably has caught you tremendously off guard, but yes, I'm not kidding. This is not a joke, and I am resigning.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, this is not the plans I had today and wasn't thinking of emotionally processing this one, but wow.
Honestly, I knew there was no time, good time to really tell you, and I knew this was going to catch you off guard, but in fairness, I wanted to give you as much time as possible to think about my replacement and how you want to handle things like transitional items. So, yeah, I figured I better tell you now.
Yeah, this is a little unexpected, Jill, and, my coffee order changing is unexpected. This is DEF CON 1.
Joe, do not panic. I got you, and I am not
Little
going
late for that, Jill.
to leave you high and dry. Come on, you know me. You know my work and you know my work ethic. So I am going to make sure things are transitioned and appropriately handed off. And I will do everything possible to make sure this transition is a success and that you guys don't skip a beat.
I understand, and,
Honestly, Joe, I thought about this a lot. I honestly, truly believe that this could be a good thing and an opportunity.
good thing? All right, I'm listening, Jill.
I honestly don't think you should rush into just replacing me. Do we even need the same role anymore? I mean, the company has been through so many changes and so many iterations that I honestly think you should sit back and reflect on how do we redefine work roles and do we even really need someone in this position that I'm in? How do we reshuffle the deck and maybe bring in some new skills that the team can benefit from?
Wait a minute. I mean, are we still talking about your resignation here, or are you setting up a podcast episode?
Welcome to the Talent Revolution, Tales from the Trenches. I'm Jill Caniglio-Kirk.
And I'm Joe Shambaum.
Well, I hope our fun skit illustrated that, honestly, maybe resignations aren't always what they look like from the outside. And I'd really like to take this conversation and dig deeper into what possibilities are there when a person on your team leaves or in your organization leaves, and how could we look at that as an opportunity and a time to slow down, take a pause, and re-examine roles and, how we go about bringing in new talent and redefining things. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, Jill, I love the topic because I think everyone is so rushed to go, oh my God, what's going on? And how do I backfill the same person and keep homeostasis moving forward? And to sit back and time to reflect is probably not everyone's first, thought process. So yeah, this will be a great conversation.
Truth, I am on my phone already, looking through my LinkedIn connections, sending notes out saying, do you have time for coffee tomorrow to anyone I think might have a lead for me or be a good person. So I hear you. I have gone through this many times myself where your inclination is this panic, move fast, start, just go, right?
I think that's just everyone's go-to mood, right? In mode of operation going, oh my God, I don't want to change anything. Let's keep it going. We had a good thing. They panic. So how do we set them up for success to actually stop and take a breath? And that's what everyone doesn't do, right? They're like, like I said, DEF CON 1 in our little skit, but it's really to be able to, let's really think about it. I mean, any tips or tricks on that, Jill?
Well, truthfully, let's start with all managers panic because they're like, oh, crap, I have no one else to ask to do this. And now I'm going to have to do this. And I don't even know how to do half of the things because I've been busy climbing the corporate ladder and I've been busy in meetings, right? So all of that vulnerability comes out for the leader. So I think that's a big why behind it. So I think, obviously if it's our team, we have a different response. But if we're HR and talent professionals, I think we can help kind of steer conversations, bring clarity, sit down with leaders and kind of go through that maybe group therapy exercise, let them get it all out, maybe offer some cues to kind of let them speak about those vulnerabilities and concerns they have. But then at the end of the conversation, kind of help them do the reflection and digging in as to, is this something we really want to do exactly the same way? Right? and get some quantifiable information out of what's working well in the team, what's not, right? And re-examining the role, what needs we have, and how we kind of move forward.
Well, I also think it helps redefine the role, right? What is this person really doing? And are all those appropriate, up to date for the 21st century, an AI moment? Can we streamline things? Are the right departments and the right functions and the right people doing the right things? So it's a really good time to reflect on that as well.
Yeah, and I think honestly, as a TA person, Joe, I'm sure you've had these conversations with leaders more than once where you got the rec, you got the requirements, but then maybe after they got through the emotional aspect of it and some dialogue with you, they kind of adjusted things.
They have, and it's always the fun is give me another Sally Smith. And it's like, well, Sally Smith doesn't exist, right? I mean, there's one of a kind. So let's break down what she could do or she has done to find someone else. And you got to look beyond that as well. So I've had many of those requests, and then it's a fun conversation actually with the leader when you start doing the sourcing and talking to candidates and going, well, have you thought of this? Because you're now getting into the middle of it all of here's what this other person does and here's how other companies do it. And they're not thinking that way because they just want to, keep get back to that homeostasis kind of situation.
Right. And truthfully, I would just tell every person in this situation, sit back, take a beat, talk to two or three people, get two or three different people's perspectives, maybe inside your own function, maybe one outside of your own function, and maybe one outside of your organization as, a good sounding board, and give it time to really to have you in your mind figure out what possibilities are there and what direction do you want to take this.
Yeah, and I think the consultative approach back to the TA and the HR person with that leader is huge as well. So before you set off in a path of go give me this, let's do some of that pre-work. Let's look at the talent pools out there and what are the real needs. Like I love the discussion of internal and external, Jill, for that leader to really hone in on what they really want. So then you're shaping up what that new expectation and role and responsibilities really is. That's where I think we come in and help consult them, right? And
Right.
showcase those things.
Yeah. And I think, upskilling, right? What new skills might a different person bring into the picture? Asking yourself questions like, are we trying to solve for the future? Are we trying to recreate the past? Having those honest conversations with yourself and others can really lead to giving you clarity about the most effective way to go about taking this headcount and really driving value for your team.
Well, and I think you step back as well on, is it that exact function or do we spread that across and you add in a new thing that you wanted to be able to evolve your group into, right?
Right.
So it's an opportunity for that as well. And, take the negative of somebody leaving into a positive for the whole team of, hey guys, here's what I'm thinking and get a whole discussion together and evolve into the next area, right? Bring in a subject matter expert for something else and spread some of those other responsibilities, for example. And the other aspect I want to bring up is culture, right? Like, how do you want to splash a new person and what kind of characteristics and personality do you want in that role? And I know I split the hairs into two different avenues there, Jill, but I think
Mhm.
culture is another thing that we got to remember is when you're bringing that in, what is that culture aspect?
Right. Truthfully, when you were bringing up some of those points, what immediately came to mind for me is something I've done. And honestly, I will say it won't work everywhere, but getting your own team together because everybody goes through some sense of grief when a person leaves. And I think they need time to process that. And oftentimes, if you sit down with your team, they actually present great ideas for things that maybe they've wanted to take over, or they wanted to get more involved in. And quickly, you might realize 20% of that person's responsibility are things that other people see as growth opportunities, right? The danger side of that and saying it won't work everywhere is if you are in a position where you think your people are going to want to do things you're not comfortable with giving them, then you may not want to invite that conversation and it could absolutely backfire. So I think you have to trust your gut there, but that could be a healthy exercise to go through with your team. How do we approach this, right? You may even go like who can pick something up short term and then get into more conversations about, short term versus long term. But oftentimes I found the people that have the most interesting perspectives are people that are peers to those individuals, who perhaps interact with them, at the peer level.
I think that transparency with your own team is just huge, right? Everyone, you're vulnerable at the moment because, hey, this is, we're grieving because so and so is leaving, but let's band together. Let's, we're all going to pick up extra things. This is what I'm going to do. And you could show that leadership, really come out, add value into getting their opinion. I think it's a huge thing. I love it.
Yeah,
If
truthfully,
you're able to, obviously.
and honestly, I would just say a very safe way to enter the conversation is saying, hey, no idea is crazy here. There are no promises that anything you throw out there is going to stick. But as long as we all enter this discussion, in that mindset, perhaps you set them up for saying, just because you say it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Right. So you have to trust your gut there and how to handle that, invite that conversation with the peers. When you talk about the culture piece, I think that's huge because we talk about culture fit, but I would argue and say if people fit perfectly, are they really adding to the culture? So, how do we, take that lens and how do we make sure there's a fit? But maybe beyond that, how might the individual you're bringing in or the role you're bringing in be able to kind of really add to that culture and help build that culture rather than just conform to it?
Absolutely. No, I mean, the culture add is a huge piece, or culture shift if that's needed as well. That's why I'm saying you have to look at the whole aspect of it. And that's where, partnering with your HR and TA person really add that, their perspective. But I think you brought it up as well, a peer, right? In your organization. What do you think? Where, give that 360 feedback in essence to a peer and give it to them on what do they think could be beneficial for the organization. It doesn't always have to be your boss. It could be someone else, right? Because, people look at it as a loss, but it's an opportunity when you're doing this. Maybe it's a different location. Maybe it's a different skill set. Maybe it's a different advantage that you could be able to take into it. And on the TA side, it's where can we bring in those skills that what are other organizations doing that we could then take advantage of as well and, make it our own. That's, again, it takes time though, right? Because recruiting, all of a sudden it's a flare of, oh no, we got to go do this. But how do we find new talent to help drive the business forward even more?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, it's a perfect opportunity to think about redesign. It's a perfect opportunity to think about, how can AI maybe reshape some of the other tasks for some of my other team members that like long term might look different? Is it a time to really think about internal mobility for someone? So many possibilities there, but I think the advice we're trying to give is don't rush into anything. Take a beat, talk to people, talk to your own team, and I will just say that I have had a few opportunities like this. And when I say opportunities, people are like, people leaving isn't an opportunity. Well, if the person's leaving, you could just kind of say, oh, that stinks. And it's going to adversely impact my company. And there's going to be all these losses. But you could also say, well, how do I kind of make lemonade out of this situation? I actually had a case in a company that was a startup. When the company started, the configuration of the HR team was quite different. There was no recruiting function, and they knew growth was a really important aspect of what the business needed. So they hired somebody with a super strong recruiting background. In time, we brought more people in and we brought TA people in and built a TA team. And the HR manager was actually struggling in other aspects of the role, like benefits management, and didn't have certain expertise that became important. We were seeing a lot of issues where, there was no one with the competencies. So as that person resigned, I re-examined things and said, I know what I need now. It's not what I needed when she joined. She was a very competent, very capable employee, but it enables me to really reevaluate the organization's needs today and find a better fit to really moving the needle and managing things.
Yeah, it's an opportunity as your startup evolved as well, right? And then skills and support and talent change. So it's a good opportunity, from the big lens on that side. I've had it in a couple ways, to be honest. I had a client, I call them clients, the customer internal, somebody retired and, it's like, what do we do now? And And I'm like, well, you're never going to replace that 35-year experience person. Exactly. So where's the skill and the gaps within that person's team? And he was a regional person. So some of the work in Mexico was growing and evolving. So he didn't need some of this piece. So we kind of split that role up. And it was a process because we started talking to candidates in a certain discipline and area, and he's like, well, those could work in this, and then we found somebody that ended up helping shape it. So where we started wasn't where we ended up because of the recruiting process and talking to candidates and then finding somebody that really added a value that they didn't even realize that they really wanted because of experience and different things. So it was a great, for me, it wasn't, okay, go find this. It was find this type of talent, and it evolved into it. So it was a good, fun process. It took a little bit of extra time and maneuvering. And I know the manager was anxious, but also, valued it in the end. It was a good experience that way, partnering with him. And in my own world of things, I've had recruiters leave on me, and it's like, okay, I understand development opportunities, things that I can't give them. And, some of them were some big blows because they're really good recruiters. So you take that in stride. I've shifted some of them into different disciplines. I wanted somebody more with a product background versus a software background. And so I've done those pivot myself, when you step back and look at it. And I've said it in another podcast episode that we've done, stepping back yourself or having leaders step above the forest and look at the world that you're living. You really need to do that every so often. And then you get back into the weeds. And again, not to talk about just resignations, but it's just in general on what's the landscape like, what's working well, how is my team, and then going back into it. So it's not oh no, I got to go. You're kind of on the forefront of some of that stuff.
Yeah, you're talking about the forest and the trees there actually made me think about something else. And I actually think it's the opposite. I've lived in the forest, and if I have a vacancy on my team, haven't necessarily walked a mile in that person's shoes. So I had one a few years ago where I intentionally decided I need to step in. I need to really feel the pain and the daily struggles and really understand this role to get the right fit. So I also think there's opportunities there where there might be a plant that you're responsible for that isn't close in proximity, that you know is a troubled, challenging environment. And it also presents an opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to step in. Maybe I need to kind of crawl on my belly through the trenches, and figure things out so I get this one right, because it's too important of a role to really just guess or take, someone else's word for what the needs are. So I'll just say that I've had situations like that were extremely painful. They required a lot of personal sacrifice and travel and disruption in my life, but I decided to take that path to kind of have that long-term win and to really find that perfect fit in that challenging environment. So I would just say that's another way to look at things. And it's not fun and it's not pleasant. But I think if you're in your job for the long term and you're trying to build a team and you're trying to get it right, sometimes you just stepping into the line of fire is what it takes to really understand it.
Yeah, that's huge, actually. I think your team will appreciate that as well, right? That you're back into the trenches of things and you've lived it with them, and the new hire, because you're going to know the process and the systems and the frustration or the positivity that you can then come from that. It's a huge bonus in that way.
Yeah. And I would also say, and this one I did not do, but these are the things that, these lessons we learned through the School of Hard Knocks. During that time, which I did that for probably more than half a year, what I should have done is really offloaded some of my strategic work and projects to another person showing that potential, wanting to climb the ladder. I really should have taken that opportunity to think about, how do I hand off some of that to kind of really develop someone else on my team rather than, try to do it all? So I would just say that's one I learned, through a real example. When I reflected on it later, I realized I missed an opportunity there.
Yeah, that's a great, developmental thought process for others, right? Give them a quick assignment. The other thing I was thinking of is, I know people, you get panicked when this happens and there's a big void. Maybe sometimes before you go fill it permanently and, if you're redesigning it, maybe it's a contractor or a short-term assignment for somebody to
You know,
do one little piece of it or some aspect of it.
great point. There's so many consultants out there. Fractional work has become huge. I think every functional area you can think of, there's a ton of fractional professionals that you could bring in, hit the ground running, right? While you do your longer term search or figuring out of things.
Yeah, I mean, filling the void of 75%, whether it's, it depends on it, and it all levels can play into this contract fractional aspect of it. And if you're at least getting, and the team would appreciate it, right? If there's a team piece to it, come in and do this piece of it while we, so it offloads and, balances some of the work while you're still looking at the bigger picture. I mean, don't forget about that, right? And that's especially when you get into small businesses, one person leaving is a huge impact. And, you got to keep the doors open and keep things rolling. So there's a lot of different options out there for the short and long term.
Spoken like a true TA professional.
We come in armed with different ammunition, right? For the leaders. And
The Swiss
that's
Army knife of all things recruiting.
well, right. And that's especially for our world, we like to be a part of that design because it helps us shape and really when you're out there looking for the talent and, options are need to be presented. And that's, the HR person may not be there to be able to have that consult and you work together on it, but you have a big relationship with that leader and they love the options and you can help steer them down a path that will work. Right. So.
I want to be clear in saying that this episode is not about the people leaving not being valued or valuable contributors. It's really all about making lemonade out of lemons and having that opportunity to shift, pivot, re-examine. And sometimes those people look at it and say, see, I wasn't even replaceable.
Or you get split up into multiple different roles. And I've seen that before. I've had friends go, listen, I've left and they replaced me with 3 people. And it's like, well, it's dividing the work. It could be opportunities for other folks. And again, every person is unique because of what they can and they haven't done or can do. And, the business has to evolve into those things, right? And the other thing that I think is strong that everyone has to remember is you're never, I haven't seen it yet, replace that person exactly. You can't find another Sally Smith, right? You can find similar education, you can find similar experience, but Sally Smith, and that's obviously fictional, everyone, is unique and everyone's unique and it brings into those things. And I think the other leaders in the team have to remember, when they bring someone new in, well, they're not Sally. No, they're not. That is 100% correct. And they never will be. You have to get that mindset out of it and move on and in the forward of whatever it is. Even if you're just replacing the exact same role, because that's what you determine, that's fine. But don't get hung up in the past.
Right. One other thing, a little off topic, because I know we're going to be wrapping up here in a minute, came into my mind. Don't minimize what the person leaving might tell you about their role or what they would do. Some question like, if you were me, how would you approach, either backfilling your position or bringing a new resource into the team or reallocating your work? Because honestly, I've had situations like that, really shedding light on things I wouldn't have considered. So I just feel like you can't really have enough conversations with enough different people to get those perspectives to factor in.
Yeah. And ultimately, everyone, it's a conversation, right? With multiple different folks, whether it's TA and HR, your leadership, your peers outside, and your team, right? And that's what you have to really take this opportunity, make, lemonade out of lemons here and really drive forward. What we want you to take away from here is we want you to think, right? Step back, get out of the forest, into the line of sight and go, what makes the most sense to move your organization and your team forward when this situation does arise. So great topic, Jill.
Yeah.
I love this.
And I know your gut tells you go fast, you're in panic mode, but honestly, going slow is going to lead to much better results and outcomes. I promise you. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your ideas about the topic, feedback.
Tales from the trenches, please share with us, put it in the comments because we'd love to hear it and everybody learns from those stories. So
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone. And don't forget to share, like, and follow us.
Goodbye.